20 years in the business as a real estate agent, I know that this is not an easy feat for real estate agents. So I want to share with you this journey and what it takes to become a 20-year or long-term real estate agent. So I am Kim Barber. I am a real estate agent, an investor, and a coach. And I went into real estate in 2004 after leaving a great career, honestly, in technology. And I did that for like 16 years. And then I flipped over to my second passion because honestly, there's nothing better and scarier than being an entrepreneur in any industry. But real estate, is one of those things where I had no idea that it had a huge failure rate, 87%. And I can't believe that I've made it through to 20 years. So I want to share with you a little bit about my journey, but also as it relates to you, whether you are a new agent, if you've been in the business for a while, if you're crushing it, or maybe you're struggling, especially as they constantly make these changes like they did recently where they changed like the buyer agency and all the commissions. So how when the cheese moves, how we have to move with the cheese to make it through all of the trials and tribulations of not only being an entrepreneur, but also working in the real estate landscape. So what is it that makes somebody go into this real estate, crazy industry? And why did I go into it? I get that question a lot. Why did you leave the technology industry? Because quite honestly, I had a great career. And sometimes honestly, I question that myself, why would I leave such a great career and then jump into something that, it has a lot of variables. And again, that is something that I question. Perhaps you question it because people are like, I want to become a real estate agent. And then my second question is why? So my why had to do with me being able to control my future. So I left corporate, if you will. I was an executive. But one of the things that I really struggled with is the politics, the water cooler conversations, not having control over my schedule. And while I made really good money, 30 years old, making well into six figures was great, and especially when that was, so I'm in my 50s, and so that was when I was 30. So you can do the math depending on when you're listening to this. So, but that's the thing is that I know there's a lot of people that want to move into real estate. They have this career. They want to try part-time agency. For me, I jumped into real estate. Basically, I had put some money aside and I flipped a house because that's one of the hardest things, I think, from corporate to real estate was, well, there's a few things, but how to fund it. How am I going to make sure that I go from this steady income, this steady schedule, paid vacations, and then I go over to 100% commission, that. And, if you haven't gone into real estate yet, that is one of the huge things, or maybe you're thinking about it. It doesn't matter where you are in your real estate career. I'm sure that you know what I'm talking about. So I flipped a house to make sure that I had at least 6 months of income, 6 months of reserves so that I didn't have that stress. So that's also one of the things that I think is a huge failure rate is running out of cash. So for me, that was part of my strategy. And again, my passion was that, I started my first company when I was 18, and I knew then, having been a young mom, that I needed the stability. I needed the guaranteed income. I didn't move into real estate until my daughter was in her teens because, while I had a lot of support, I was also really needing to kind of act as if I'm a single mom and not really have so much risk and stress in my career because the hours were varying. And I had in corporate and regular hours, I had that 8 to 5. And even though I was working a lot more, it doesn't matter. In real estate, that was one of the things that I struggled with is the varying hours. And so along my journey, I would say that there was a few hurdles that we have to overcome and a few things that also made me very successful coming out of the gate. So for me, and for you as an agent, how do we get started? I get that question. What should I do at the beginning? And so my advice, out of the gate, is number one, make sure that you have those finances pretty secure for at least 6 months. I mean, it'll take off the stress and it will just allow you to focus on the skill. So one of the things that I knew, no matter for me, I was coming out of corporate, no matter when you're starting a real estate career, I think that having the finances in order So having money in the bank, like 6 months of reserves, or 6 months of like whatever it is that you have to pay for, so I call that reserves, will really take off the stress of being kind of desperate for business or starting something and like really sweating it, because we all know that finances really, when we don't have our cash together, can just like suck. So that's one of the things that I knew coming out of the gate. So for me, what I did was I flipped a house. It just worked out that way. For example, I was going to move into that house, but then I wanted to move like someplace different. So I bought it, and then the prices had gone up, new construction. So I sold it and took that money. And so that's an idea. If you're thinking about going into real estate and then now being an investor, it was a lesson that I learned, because at that point it was also like my third house that I had sold. I was like 30 years old. So anyway, that was one of the things that I recommend to make sure, if you're listening to this and you are just getting into the market, you're thinking about going into real estate, whether it's you on your own or you with a partner that has a second income, that makes it a lot easier. So one of the next things that I knew that worked really well for me was to make sure that I had a couple different lead sources. So again, as a business owner, starting out as an entrepreneur, I knew I needed that cash. Then as a business owner, I needed to make sure that I had steady income. And then so as business owner, then we also have to make sure that we have marketing, lead generation, lead conversion, and then retention, right? So that's all the things that we have to be as a business owner in the real estate market. So going back to the, business side, again, the money, don't mean to harbor on that, but it's like really a big thing, because as we go into marketing, then for me, I was like, I really didn't want to outlay a bunch of cash to different lead sources. So I went with, my sphere, people that I know, like, and trust. Then I was like, there's only so many of those, right? So then I went after expireds and for sale by owners. So even though it was like 2004 and things were like flying off the shelf, there was still expireds and there was for sale by owners. So that became my second and third lead source. And then I also started geographic farming. And then I went to open houses with that. So that was a big lesson that I learned right away, which was not having all the eggs in one basket, so that when one got thin, I had others to lean onto. And so another thing that became really relevant and important to me, I'm like, okay, I already got a taste for being an entrepreneur, what it takes. I understand the business owner, like the structure of it with checking accounts and setting up the licensing and the doing business as and creating my brand, which I did Kim Barber Group. But I also wanted to make sure I was like, okay, I got that part, but knowing what to say and understanding the product, which is selling houses, and the product is value-added service. So I had been a consultant in also, and I was like techie, but then I was a consultant. So I'm like, I broke it down into my head. I'm like, requirements analysis, like what's my goal? Make a lot of money. And so I also, though, knew the value of really high quality real estate service, because I didn't have great service from the agents. I had one that was really great, but this other person who would help me was really all about herself. So that was something that I brought. I'm like, I want high quality service. So if you're listening to this, I think that really it's very important to remember that they're hiring an expert. We get paid very well, which is great. And also, if we want to stand out in the crowd, then we have to know what to say. We have to know the product and the industry that we're working in. So that's something that I took to a passion. And so every day for 4 years, like I had the discipline of working like Monday through Friday. The whole Saturday thing was a little sketch for me, but that was part of the deal. And so I would get up every day and I would role play for 4 years from like 7:30 to 8 or 8 to 8:30. I got a coach. So my first coach was Mike Ferry, and he was way into like the scripts and stuff like that. If you would like, also, I want to drop it in here right now, is like, if you would like some of this kind of content from me in my newsletters, then there's some links either in my bio or in the description below, depending on where you're hearing this from, where I would love to send you some my tips and tricks that I've learned in my journey. And then I encourage you to stay through this video so that you can pick up on the whole 20 years, because each part my business grew. So going back to that, I knew that I'm like, if I know what to say, so I got a coach, I role played, I did it for 4 years, so I got really good at it. I had my scripts in front of me, like I stood in this space, and then I had my scripts in front of me so I could look, and no matter what the lead source was, I had my objections right in front of me. I stood up, so my energy was good. And then I also learned how to read people. on the phone, like what they said, what kind of personality they were, and then also the way that they described like their house and things like that also helped describe their personality. So that was really important, because then I was able to like land more appointments, right? Because they're like, oh, I sound like you, and people like to work with who they know, like, and trust. And so when they're like synergistic, so that was a big lesson that I learned, is the people person, the what to say, because I didn't get that in my first industry. Like, I was talking to technology and clients, but I had that consultation, like asking them what they need and asking a lot of questions, which I still do in my coaching business. I ask a lot of questions before I throw out an answer. So I do that, and I bring that forward. The other thing that I learned that I want to stress is that to create our value, especially like now, I'm recording this in 2024, they just had this shakeup of like the whole buyer commission, seller commission, and the NAR and all that stuff. So I understood how to make sure that we showed value out of the gate, because I used to have to win proposals, right? And so I'm like, if I could know the industry and know what to say, and I could be of high value, like, I'll win. And so I knew what to say, I did my role play, and then I would go out, and every day if I didn't have an appointment, this was a discipline that I had, I would go look at houses. And if I was getting like an appointment, like especially expired, had me like moving around a lot, and I didn't know the area that well, like I would study the comps, I would go drive around the neighborhood, I would go see the properties if I could. So when I was talking with them, I'm like, have you seen this property? And they're like, no. And I'll be like, well, I went in here and then, you know, XYZ, and could compare. So I was adding a lot of value, because people like to work with like that high niche, you know, like we know that neighborhood. And so that allowed me to compete and win. So that's something that I learned right out of the gate that really worked well for me. And then the cheese moves. So a lot, like I said, in the now, where people are like, should I not become a buyer agent? Should I do something different? No, just communicate your value. And so when you go meet with people, you have the right contracts, you communicate your value and the pros and cons of working with a real estate agent. I already had to do that with for sale by owner or expireds, because they already had a bad experience. They already knew what it was like. For sale by owners taking a lot of risk, and they already saw the discount. If you didn't work with a buyer or seller, people will come in and say, well, if you're not paying the commissions, I'm not going to give you the sales price. And they would take on all the risk. So I already knew how to say that. So it's a lot like today, in moving forward, depending on when you're hearing this, that understanding our value, knowing what to say, and showing them that in the contract is really big lessons. So then understanding the market and the space around us. So when the market started dropping, in my story, 2008, well, and you might be listening to this and your market's dropping already, but seeing the stats, and I have a video about this, about how to read markets stats and how to do price decreases, price increases was very important. Increases is easier. But saying to them, like, here's the market that we're in, here's the strategies that you can do, and being able to say that fluidly is really important. So again, you can get some of my tips and stuff in my newsletter. So look for that in the links. And so anyway, in my journey, the cheese moved, started being foreclosures and short sales. So when that happened, you know, like I had to do 6 years of like short sales. So that's lead source number 5. Then I had to do foreclosures. That's lead source number 6. And I networked around that. So I was like, now I was selling 100 houses a year, and I had to be present, right? I had to go to conferences. I had to network. I had to mastermind with other people and put myself around people that are smarter than me or at my level. And so we could collaborate and learn from people. That's also when my leads started like compounding. And one of the lessons though that I learned is that I had a lot of volume of leads and listings. I had 85 listings at one point. I should have had a buyer agent, mini buyer agent sooner, but I was so focused on selling with my assistants that's a big lesson learned. So that seeing those leads ahead of time is something that I have an appreciation for. And at what volume of leads do you need to bring in assistants? That started with me and buyer agents. That started with me in 2009. And now with my workflow automation and the way I set up my CRMs, I can see the volume of leads coming in. And then I can see, like, do my agents have too many leads, or do they need more leads? So too many leads can be bad. It can cost a lot of money if we can't keep up with them. So just moving through the cheese is something that hopefully we don't see that market again, the foreclosures and the short sales. I do think in areas around the country that are having price decreases, which I think in my area, Northern Virginia, it's not really happening unless they overprice. A lot of the sellers are getting greedy, but those kind of skills are important. So when you come in there and say, hey, the market stats is showing this, and again, I have a video about that, then we are the expert. They are putting a big investment in our hands. And so appreciating that, giving that knowledge back is our job. So I think that that's very important. And that's what made me win a lot of business, and my team, and being able to coach them on that. Now that we've won, like we got the client, things like that, it became really like wild to experience managing clients, especially when they became difficult. And managing difficult clients is exhausting. It's something that once we get through it, like we don't have to keep our relationship with them. But sometimes it felt like I was being like a therapist. And sometimes it took huge exercises in patience or biting my tongue, because these are like, people have their like normal personality, especially if you've taken the DISC test, right? You know, like there's the in your natural state personality, and then there's under stress personality. So that under stress personality, especially depending on why they're moving, like divorces, like people will get really stressed out about that. Also, like if something would go wrong, and I felt like people were always pointing like at the agent, like it's my fault that after you bought it, that something happened, even though we had a home inspection, like that's not me, you know, but it would get in our head like, well, it's your fault. Or people would fight back and forth, and we're kind of in the middle. Towards the end of the transaction, like everything is great and you got all your money, or under contract, and you were stressing about like you couldn't get it under contract before, like when I was managing expireds. So managing them and really looking through the lens of how do they feel on the other side? You know, what are they going through? And not be patronizing, but be empathetic, and going back to the contract. I had to go back to the contract like a lot. And so that's something that I think is the hardest struggle, is not buying into whatever they're trying to put us in. And then quite honestly, like what they're trying to put in our mind, like something's our fault. Or like one time I had a guy who was like, he did not want to sell this house, but it was a divorce, and his ex-wife moved all the way across the country. Like you couldn't get further across the country, and she was paying the bill. So she was getting mad at me because the house wasn't going under contract, or my team. Yet the guy that was living there, her husband, soon to be ex, was like not keeping the house clean, wouldn't let people come see the house. And then when we got it under contract, and she's like flipping out at me and my team, like aggressive. And then we get it under contract, and it's 7 acres. And then the guy like didn't mow the lawn. And then he like poured stuff on the well. And it was July 3rd. And I had to like go and ask family to get a bush hog, because the grass was 3 feet. And you have to like hail that stuff, and like getting this done, managing the agent so she didn't flip out, getting him through, like he cried at closing. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I would see him at church. So still putting on my professional face, like those are some of the harder things that I think that you just have to go through. And then when we have those tough days, persevering through it and making sure that we don't let these people get to us too long. Like get it out of our system, know that it's not us, or know that maybe it is us or you, and that we could have handled something differently, and not doing it again. So that's something that I think the more sales we have, the more people we run into. And then sometimes, quite honestly, the best deals we get, or the best things that happen to us, are the deals that we didn't get, right? Because there's nothing more miserable than being desperate for an opportunity and then having to take on a client, or not being able to let them go if they're impossible. So we shouldn't let people be rude to us. We shouldn't let people talk down to us. And sometimes we had to resort to like putting everything in writing and just getting through it, because people can be crazy. That's just what's up. So some of the other things that I've learned that now I'm giving back to my agent community is that, you know, persevering and getting through some very challenging times in real estate, like they're going to likely happen. And, you know, I went through a challenging time. I had 6 people on my team, and I was approaching, you know, $1 million a year. And, you know, being a top 1% and persevering through this, it means that we have a lot of leads. And I had to step back while I took care of some health issues that lasted like 5 or 6 years. I was working, but I wasn't able to be in it full time. And in this era, I saw a lot of bad habits creep back in because I wasn't there to like monitor and hold people accountable. And when I switched over to my other CRM system, which I use now, kvCORE, we had done an audit because we had to like move the leads over, and we chose to do it a little bit more manually, which was exhausting, but very important. And so I saw $3.2 million of closed commission where people had told us that they plan to buy and sell. If you come to my live masterclass, which I invite you to do, you'll hear a lot more about what I'm going to share now. But I saw some horrible habits come out that in this audit, we had let $3.2 million of closed commissions slip through the fingers. And that has an impact on me, has an impact on my buyer's agent. And I was very upset, gut-wrenching, major medical bills, life happens. And so what I was like, wow, all that money I had spent on all those leads. So it wasn't just how much closed commission slipped through, but it was all the money and time that I had invested in these leads that, I had inside salespeople. I was doing my own things, that was gone too. And so one of the lessons is persevering through that kind of situation. And then also, how do you get on the other side of it? So kind of adding into this thing, like I had a team that I decided to scale down and only work with full-time people that had big whys, that I felt were committed and who wanted to follow the same process like I did, because that's kind of some of the stuff that it takes, knowing what your why is, getting the skills, showing up every day, producing high value results. And that kept up my brand. The other thing that I realized is like, not everybody needs to have a big team, right? I don't like to have big teams. Like sometimes we see a lot of that, but not everybody needs to do that to make your success. My success is not having a big team. I like work-life balance. So what I did was I said, well, how does this never repeat itself again? And so having proven systems and strategies is a critical part to the success. Once you need the leverage and you have so many leads that you can't keep up with them in the classic like Excel files or basic systems like that I had started with, years ago. And so I created workflow automation because I'm like, I want it to be easy. There was no blueprint to exist that balanced experience with automation. So I created it. And I said, I'm never going to always have to train and stand over my agents. I don't want leads to continue to fall through the cracks. And the only way that I could do it was to create automation where my brand was consistently in front of people and that it was based on true experience, because CRM systems, they're built by software companies. They're not built with subject matter experts necessarily, like I had done in my first career, where we would ask people, what do you do and when? And we would reverse engineer it. So I did that for myself. In my Kim Barber coaching and my coaching company, this is one of the products that I help sell, is my campaigns. But I coach people on how to use this because I know how important it is. And I've already experienced the amount of money that you can have slip through the cracks in the low ROI, that I was like, how do we break through this? So I created it. And so that is one of the biggest things that makes a huge impact on your company, is having proven systems and strategies. And that's what I do now. So I'm an agent. I mentioned this before. I'm an investor. I like to live a dream life. I don't want to work 7 days a week. So I like to be able to work, like while I'm here, I'm still in front of all my clients. Somebody could come into my system. They know what to say, when to call, and when to do all of these things, which is not what I had done very well in the past. So that's what I have now. So I'm very excited for that. I'm very excited about the future. Like, this is the world that we can live in. This is the world that to me is my dream life, that after 20 years of persevering, I don't want a big team. I like to coach agents and sell to my sphere. So I don't pay for leads anymore either, but that takes time to do. My retention rate is high. That takes time to do, but it takes time with this automation, and that creates the scale. That means, and we don't have to like let our eyes bleed. The last thing that I want to share that I think is really important is work-life balance. I got burnout when I was doing the REOs, when I had 85 properties in my inventory. It was very, very overwhelming because I didn't have the right structure. And so one of the things that I would say is part of the structure is the use of your personal phone. So having, whether it's a Google Voice number or a smart number that's connected to your CRM, which is better, then there's a work-life balance that's part of one of the systems. And so that when you're on vacation, when all the notes and the calls need to be tracked so that somebody else can like take over the phone, whether it's an agent like on your team or an agent that you're paying to help you or an assistant, that's a very important system to put into place. I don't give my personal number out to anybody that's not a client. And I am very passionate about that. The other thing that I think is a system is, what are your hours? So that's a business owner. It's also value that our clients know when they can reach us. I think they've always respected it more. And I use my language, hey, when I get into the office tomorrow, et cetera. So those are two things that I think are very, very important, so that I have relationships with my family that are tighter. My family doesn't feel always pushed aside. My friends, I'm not always over there. I went through that era, but it's nice to be on the other side of that. So no matter when you're starting, when you're listening in your career, very important, very passionate about those things, because getting burnout and having no boundary, I think, is unhealthy. So I hope that you have gotten some value out of this. Having the niche, drilling down, having work-life balance, having systems, having a goal, having those dreams allows us to build our dream life, right? We're in sales, and so anything is possible. Creating wealth, generational wealth, with those things is totally possible. And so I hope that you also make it this far. And if you have some comments that you would love to share, if this has been helpful for you, if there's an aha or a tip that you got, I would love it if you shared it in the comments below. If you could also give me that thumbs up. If you made it this far, I love it. And with that thumbs up, YouTube knows that I'm giving you valuable content, and hopefully this has been helpful. So if you haven't already, I would love it if you subscribe to my station, because it is my goal to help agents, ambitious agents and entrepreneurs, increase their success through proven systems and strategies. All right, I'll see you next time.